We have also been waiting for, because the big question tonight is Kenya having a tax issue with the president saying they're raising tax, or is Kenya having a debt issue? Let's take a look at the figures we have and the explanations we have with that, because we are focusing tonight on the Finance Bill 2022 and exclusively focusing on the economy of the country. Let's begin with three theories in what has been happening in the country. Now, the three theories have been advanced by President William Ruto, who has opposed tax increase. Raila Odinga, the opposition leader, however, says there is no need for more taxes, while Jimmy Wanjigi, who was the presidential candidate in the last election, talks about debt default and reorganizing entirely in order to finish this debt burden. So these are the three theories that exist so far on what is going on in the country right now regarding our debt and our taxes. So let's begin with the tax burden. Is it a tax burden or a debt burden? There is definite need to raise more taxes. If you ask yourself, why is the government raising or adding taxes? The simple answer is because the government has to finance the budget. That is the reason why we are increasing, or the government is increasing taxes. But the question is, do we have a tax need or it's a debt burden? We'll find out shortly by looking at the Finance Bill 2023. A total of 3.6 trillion shillings has been proposed in this budget, the highest by any measure. The revenue collection target in this financial year has been projected to 2.5 trillion shillings by the current government. Current revenue collection stands at about 1.5 trillion. I remember just at the end of March, it was about 1.3. Now it's about 1.5 trillion. They are targeting 2.5 trillion. With only a few days remaining to the next financial year, the question is it even achievable? Well, if it's not, the deficit in this collection is about 1 trillion shillings to meet the target of 2.5 trillion. Projected collection for this year is about 1.8 trillion, 400 billion less. In 2022-23 revenue, the collection was about 2 trillion. Now, Kenya's debt is currently at 9 trillion. Now, the president said during the interview over the weekend that it's about 8.8 rounded off to about 9 trillion. Annual repayment of our debt is about 1.7 trillion, which means half of the budget goes to pay Kenya's debt. Is that even viable? 80%, more than half of the budget, 80% of our budget goes to finance the debt. Viability of collecting more taxes this year in this financial year, zero. And why? The tax burden is already too heavy. We cannot impose more taxes because you cannot push or have more taxes from already overly taxed people. Institutions can also remit more, and of course individuals cannot pay more in order to satisfy this tax need. But the net result of what we are talking about tonight is there could be massive layoffs because institutions will want to stay afloat. So they'll fire a few people, retrench a few people, and then be able to cover that deficit that is needed for tax. And also there'll be demand from the workers. Why don't you pay us more to pay this additional tax? There's also possibility of austerity because now they can't spend more, they need to save. And obviously the net effect of this is the high cost of living, the highest cost of living, as we put it, not even high, the highest cost of living ever witnessed in the country. But obviously there's a solution to the debt crisis in the country. There's austerity as a solution, imposing more taxes are proposed by the president, renegotiation of the debt that we currently have, and of course the defaulting on debt, not paying the debt, and declare debt odious. I'll explain each of this in detail. So austerity first is a very painful cross-cutting because people will be affected. They're used to a certain lifestyle. Austerity will ensure that lifestyle is taken away. And of course, the best method here is to avoid wastage in government. David Ndii, economic advisor, says there's massive wastage in the government. Now, the other solution is taxes. Imposing high taxes as proposed in the current financial bill, and can it yield additional revenue? Well, we have found out it's impossible to yield additional revenue, but it's a solution to the debt crisis. Get more taxes, get more money, and of course pay. So that's also a solution. The other solution is sitting down with these financiers and renegotiating this, but this will likely yield negative results. And I'll give you, for example, the Eurobond as a case study, because the Eurobond, the bill was about 900 billion. So if you ask to renegotiate Eurobond today, there's a clause in there that states that if it's renegotiated, what happens? It becomes due at that time. So it means you try to negotiate Eurobond, they tell you, pay us right now. Are we able to do that? It's impossible to do that. And obviously, this is a kind of worms, because if you have to renegotiate, you have to audit and you have to investigate what happened with the money. And do you want to go there? You don't want to go there. So it's not possible that they are going to renegotiate. Now, the other one is defaulting. Defaulting to us is the best but worst case scenario, because the government can then reorganize and begin afresh if they default, they refuse to pay the 1.7, and this will allow the pending bills to be paid through the 1.7 trillion, and government can save for a year and have some money, and of course the citizen will be saved from the debt burden by cutting the taxes that have been imposed on them. So the other solution is declaring this debt odious. This international law, a national debt incurred by a despotic regime, should not be enforceable. Is it possible that the government of President William Ruto is able to declare this debt odious using the law? I don't know. If it's possible, then we sort out this. So of the budget of 3.6 trillion, 1.7 I've said goes to debt. Devolution takes about 400, recurrent expenditure another 500 billion, and other expenditure 400 billion. You add this in total, it's about 3 trillion. I mean, the expenditure is just over the top. So our conclusion tonight is taxes are not a solution to the debt crisis in the country currently. It's not viable to meet the target of collecting revenue of 2.1 trillion this year, and Kenya must deal with debt, not taxes. Remember, the taxes should go to pay the debt. Taxes is not the problem in the country. Government must go back to the drawing board and rethink about this. And Kenya, obviously, according to Jimmy Wanjigi, is tethering debt default. We are already in the region of Ghana, Sri Lanka, and Argentina. All the three countries defaulted. Remember, Ghana was about 70, and the other one at Kenya is now at 77. So it's definitely not possible. And finally, focus on the economy. Managers of President Ruto's economy. Now, this picture is very important. Professor Njuguna Ndung'u is the CS Treasury, and Dr. Kamau Thuge is the central bank governor nominee. Now, just flip it. When all these debts were taken, remember Thuge, he was the PS then, and remember Njuguna was the central bank governor. What the president has done, just flipped it. The central bank governor is the CS now, and the PS now is the central bank governor. As we take a break, let's take a look at the video of the week.
Mimi nataka niwaambie hii mafuta inaongezwa usiku na mchana. Mimi nataka niwaeleze ya kwamba these people don't